people are taking care of themselves. Imagine we're in a world where people are nourished and rested and thriving, where our leaders and our children and neighbors feel centered and grounded. And in this world, this is the world I want to live in, by the way. This is why we're here today. In this world, we're giving freely because we have abundance, that within us there is a resource of an endless resource, a sustainable resource, sustainable fuel to do good, because we're doing good by ourselves. See, if we want to do good in the world, we have to be good to ourselves. And that requires self-care. And yet, I can't count the number of times that people come to me and say, either sheepishly or defiantly, that how can we focus on self-care when the world is on flames? It's just, the world is struggling, and here we are talking about the indulgence, the selfishness of self-care. Guilt and shame around self-care is profound. It is more common than I can imagine. I think I underestimated how frequently I would hear that word, even though I had experienced it a lot myself. See, we live in a world that celebrates chaos, not self-care. And so here we are in this beautiful picture, this world that I'm imagining. There isn't any guilt for self-care, because we understand that when we take care of ourselves, we're taking care of the world. We're taking care of our community, our neighbors, that when we are thriving, we are being in service to the world in a way that we have to, that not only we have permission, but we have an obligation to take care of ourselves in this way. So guilt is a distraction. Guilt is an obstacle to our being of service. Just imagine one night of no sleep. We're useless. I mean, I know for a fact I am completely useless when I have not had the sleep that I need. I'm grouchy, I'm compromised, I can't think clearly, I'm snarly, I'm looking for a fight, my food's off, I don't exercise, like it all falls apart. And so that's just a little glimpse into when we're not at our best, when we're not well, when we're not tending to our needs, we're compromising our ability to be of service. So one might then conclude that it's actually selfish to not take care of ourselves, that the world needs us at our best. And that requires us to step up, to rise, to take better care of ourselves than we've ever done before. And I'm not talking bonbons and bubble baths, although they both sound really good, actually. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the core stuff, the stuff we blow off, the sleep, the stretching, the breathing, the drinking water, the eating leafy greens and eating color. And I don't mean red dye number 40 color. I mean red pepper, organic pepper kind of color. So the fact is that now more than ever, we need to be at our best. Now more than ever, we need to rise. We need to make self-care the priority and really turn the model that it is selfish to not take care of ourselves, because our capacity to give is deeply, deeply diminished. So here's an idea. How about we untie our superhero capes and we send them to the dry cleaners, right? Send them to the cleaners. And we just retire them for a little bit. Because my guess is we need to restore ourselves, that maybe we could actually wrap ourselves with the cape, the now clean cape, to restore ourselves, to fortify ourselves so that we can give sustainably. Self-care actually generates more energy for us to march. It helps us find our voice so that we can protest. It helps us have the ability to create financial abundance so that we can give and donate. It actually gives us the mental clarity to see the issues that this world demands of us. We need to see them with clarity. We need to see them with a wisdom that we can't access when we're buried in self-neglect, when we're telling ourselves really outdated stories that self-care is a guilty pleasure or something that maybe we cram in at the end of the day. It's actually the fuel for how we serve. So I want to challenge your ideas about self-care as guilty a pleasure or as indulgence. I really want to wake up that sense of commitment to the next generation that we're going to break this cycle, this story, especially for little girls, to be able to say, you know what, martyrdom is so last century. Martyrdom doesn't help us here, that we don't need to suffer in response to suffering. I mean, here's the thing, we can't solve poverty if we're distracted by our own starvation, spiritual starvation, physical starvation, mental starvation, emotionally starvation. We need to actually feed ourselves, and from that place of nourishment, give and show up. Because underperforming for ourselves in the name of being in service to everybody else, it doesn't make sense. It's not a good strategy. It's not one that works. It's simply ineffective. So we need to change the way we change. We need to change the way we bring about change. We need to tend to our own gardens. Right? So I'm often reminded that, you know, we have our own yards, and we can create beauty. We can plant beautiful flowers, put beautiful pots of cascading vines, all this beauty we can create. We can pull the weeds, remove them, and really create beauty. Or we can spend all our time looking at everybody else's gardens and neglected yards and pointing out where all the weeds are. It starts with us. See, how can we create world peace when there's a battle within us? When we actually have a terrorist in our own mind that is berating us, telling us we're not enough, that we're too much, that we've somehow have failed in just being the kind of community leader we need to, or being the person we want to be, or the wife or the husband, or the employee or the boss or anything else. It's like that is the first peace we need to create, the peace in our soul and the peace in our mind. And then the way we're giving is actually coming from bounty and abundance and beauty and all these things that we need, so that we're giving for the right reasons. Left unchecked, giving quickly becomes overgiving, and it quickly becomes a story about our egos, right? And we've lost sight of actually why we're here and how we can serve. It really becomes about us, but we tell ourselves we're doing it for everybody else. And the fact is, it's delusional to think that our care and our well-being doesn't impact the world. Here's the thing, there are forest fires. The temperature is like, right? We have droughts. This is real. We have inflamed tempers. We have a virus that creates high temperatures. We are like angry and heated. We're having heated conversations. I mean, we have chronic inflammation. This is too much heat. And the world is mirroring our inner lives for most of us. So this is our opportunity to really see it for what it is, that we can change the world by starting first with ourselves. Not perfecting ourselves, that's not the goal. Despite the temptation, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about elevating our care at a time when it's really easy for us to tell ourselves that there's no time to do that. We don't have time, there's crises. Well, you know, we got to get off the stage. We got to let go of the drama, and we've got to ground ourselves and root ourselves in exceptional self-care. This is our chance to do it. This is the call. This is the battle cry, that we actually have this opportunity to change, to role model how we give, to role model how we can create the change we want to see in the world. So I implore you to lean into nourishment. Here's the thing, when guilt comes up, I like to see it as a tool or a weapon. Here's the tool part. The tool is, when guilt comes up, I want you to just take a deep breath and be like, I actually must be making tremendous progress. I actually must be on the path for making the right choice, because the thing is, our nature is often to self-deny. So if we're on this end of doing nothing for ourselves, and we fear this end, which is just indulgence and slovenly and just completely self-absorbed, right? I guarantee you are not here. You wouldn't be listening to me. You wouldn't be in my tribe. You wouldn't simply care about my message at all if you were here. You're on this end. I know it. I know you. I am you, right? So when you start feeling guilt, all it means is that you've moved like a quarter of an inch on the spectrum, right? Don't worry. You're not going to get over here. I want you to lean into the guilt. I tell my clients that every time. Whenever guilt shows up, it's like, oh yeah, I'm on the right path. I'm starting to move the needle away from self-denial into self-realization, right? Self-care requires self-awareness. And when we're aware, we actually can be mindful of how we give, right? We're not spreading our cray-cray all over the place, and we all have it. We're not spreading our cray-cray all over. We're really bringing peace and healing and well-being because we're tending to ourselves, and we're actually creating wellness in the world through our own habits. So guilt as a tool is, it's a little insight, right? A little like, I must be on my way towards making better choices that of self-advocacy, okay? The way that it's a weapon is that we use it as permission for inertia. It's like, it's too guilty. I feel too guilty to do that. Therefore, I'm not going to do anything, which is like, really? Like, it is not permission to stop. Guilt, like all we want to stop is the guilt story. If we're going to see it as a weapon, we actually stop and say, hey, not on my watch. Not on my watch. Guilt isn't going to dictate my choices. It can't have that much say in my actions. So you can decide. You either leverage guilt, right? And if you want to leverage guilt as a tool, here's the thing. Feel guilty. If you're going to feel guilty anyway, I would suggest you feel guilty when you don't have your own back. Feel guilty when you're role modeling self-neglect, right? To your children, to the people around you. So use it. If guilt is something that actually has compelled you to action in the past and you can use it as a tool, then use it as a way to say, you know what, I feel guilty when I don't have my own back and show up for myself in a way so that I can serve mindfully, so that I can be the highest version of myself. Or let it go, let guilt go and just say, you know what, the greatest act of commitment to the world, right? The greatest act that I can do, the greatest way that I can show up and be of service is to be at my absolute best. The world needs us at our absolute best right now. And in order to be at our best, it simply requires that we do what we need to do. We need to rest on the foundation of intentional care. The sleep. Are we tending to our mind, right? Are we creating chaos in our minds, or are we cultivating peace? And from that, bringing peace into the world. So what are you eating? What are you thinking? What are you saying? What are you doing? Whose company are you keeping? What kind of input do you let? These are acts of self-care. These acts of boundaries, right? What do I say yes to? What do I say no to? We can't serve. And I would even argue you have no business saying yes to that next committee, that next board invitation, that next bake the cookies for this. Like, you have no business doing that unless you are tending to the basics, unless you are tending to the sleep, unless you are resting your body and mind and spirit and fortifying yourself with nutrition, with mindfulness, with a cup of tea, with being grounded and hanging out in love instead of the desperation of the suffering. We're not in a position to serve the suffering when we create suffering within ourselves. It compromises our ability. So I implore you to think differently about how you bring about change, and let it first start with you. Thank you for listening.